The next thing that you'll be doing is painting. There's tons of different paints that you can use out there, but the kind of paint that I use is the Basics Liquitex. You can buy this at Michael's and some Joann stores. I don't think you can buy it at Walmart. And I find this paint to be a little rubbery, a little like latex paint, even though I believe it is an acrylic-based paint. But that means that it bends and it stretches instead of some of the paints, acrylic paints that I've used at Walmart actually end up cracking over time because it's pretty solid and it doesn't want to bend with the foam as it molds and shifts whenever you hit somebody with it. So these are the kind of paints that I end up using. What you're going to end up doing is you're going to put some on the blade, however you'd like to do it. I have a paintbrush, and I just end up putting the paint on the paintbrush and then spreading it around. You can put it on the blade itself and then spread it around, or whatever you would like to do. But with the Basics Liquitex paint, what I specifically like to do is make it as thin as I possibly can, because I have found that if I lay it on pretty thick, it's not going to dry for but maybe like 3 hours or something. So you want to be very careful to make it thin to where it'll actually dry within a reasonable amount of time, because as well you're going to have to put on 2 coats. So if it takes 3 hours to dry for the first coat, it'll take 6 hours to dry to just get the primary paint color on that you want. But if you apply it pretty thin, I'm not exactly sure how long it takes. I haven't really thought about it, but it doesn't take all that long. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fast forward through me just basically painting the blade. Okay, now that I got the gray painted on, it's a little thin. You can still see a little bit of black, which is good. You want to try and make it as thin as possible, as I said. But next I'm going to be making the brown for the handguard and the brown for the pommel. So I'll go grab that, fast forward through me painting that as well. Alright, now I got the first layer of brown painted on. As I said before, it's pretty thin as of right now, but once we put on the second layer, it'll look a lot better. Now the sword looks a little something like this. And we'll finish up the second layer whenever it dries up. So we'll wait on that. And then we'll move on to the next step, which is finishing it up with a wash. And now that the paint has had time to dry, we're going to apply the second layer of paint. And of course we're going to go ahead and fast forward through that. Alright, now that we have our paint dry, it's a nice solid color and there are no wet spots or anything, as well as you want to wait a little bit longer than just a normal dry because you're going to be applying water to this paint now. This is what I call a wash. I'm not sure if everybody else calls it a wash or not, but what I do is I take some black paint and I put it on my brush like we always have been doing, and you're going to put quite a bit on there. The way that I found out about this method is normally I would put a little bit of black paint on the brush and then I would barely put a little bit of black paint on there with some water, and it would give the sword a nice real looking texture. But one day I put on way too much black paint and water, and I tried to wipe it off with the paper towel. Not all of it came off of the weapon, but I looked at it and it looked really cool. So that's the method that I use. What you do is you grab your water and you put a big old glob of water on there and you start rubbing it across the weapon. You're going to want to grab some more water as you go along. Normally I would just mix water and paint together, but usually whenever I would mix the water and paint together, the paint would glob at the bottom and I'd have to go in after the paint and it wouldn't really mix with the water itself. So I was just, you know what, let's just get the paint itself wet and rub it on there. I put a little too much paint on here, but we're going to be rubbing it off anyways, so that's no big deal. Here we go. Put this aside and grab a paper towel. I use Viva paper towels. I think they work pretty well, but as you can see, as I rub it, the paint is starting to come off. And as you can see, it's going to be mostly on there, and it's just going to be kind of rubbing the paint around a little bit, so you're going to want to grab another paper towel if it's still too dark. As you can see, it's starting to really lighten up, and you can rub it as long as you want to get the desired effect that you want, because some people want lighter looking swords and some people want darker looking swords. I like mine to look kind of gritty and dark, and that's one of the reasons why I use the black paint over the gray paint. A lot of people will, instead of using black paint, they will use a lighter, more metallic-y silver paint to go over it to make it look like a more real shiny blade instead of a dark, gritty looking blade like this. But I like my weapons to look a lot more darker, a lot more evil kind of looking than very shiny, pretty weapons. So we're going to do the same to this side. But with this side, since you saw what I did before, we'll go ahead and fast forward through it. Okay, now we got both of the sides of the blade painted. Now we're going to do the brown on the hand guard as well, and the pommel, because these are a little more of a basic, plain brown color than I want it to be. So we'll go ahead and fast forward through that as well. Alright, in the end it's going to look a little something like this, but we'll go ahead and let that dry for a moment, then we'll finish it up, take a picture, and we'll be done with the weapon.